That was a bit quiet. You can do better than that. How are you feeling? Well, it's lovely to see so much kindness and compassion in the room. And I think we were just having a little chat about this with different people this morning. I'm sorry I couldn't be here from the beginning. I was in other meetings. But I'm here to talk about something really, I would say, quite in-depth and quite heavy. But I wanted to try and keep it as light as possible, because I think that's the real way of dealing with any grieving process. I think grief itself, the actual word, the Latin, I believe the definition of it means heavy. I don't know if anybody knew that before. So grief itself interprets as heaviness. And grief itself is a process in which we go through when we lose something, when we are at loss. And we have lost much over the last nearly 2 years. I think for some of us, most of our lifetime. At some point, they say on average, we face about 6 traumatic to 7 traumatic events in our life, in a person's lifetime. That's the maximum we can handle. And if you and I were to sit down and do an individual trauma test to see how many events you've had, I'm sure no doubt there would be at least 10 for every one of us in here. That's just the world we're in at the moment. So I wanted to try and, I guess, give a talk on how can we turn that around? How can we make it easy and lighter for ourselves and for others around us that are suffering as well, that we care about, that we love? And the simplest form, and I think we couldn't find a more appropriate event for it, is with kindness. Kindness to yourself first. So learning to be kind to ourselves, accepting whatever it is that you're going through, and not hating ourselves and others is the first step. And that's how we turn grief around, to be a better process, to be an easier process, if there is one. So a little bit about me. I don't know how much, some of you do know me. My name is Ansa, and I'm the founder and CEO of Hope Support Services, which the legal name is Hope Bereavement Support, KIC, which is a community interest company. We started over 8 years ago as a support group for women and for families who'd lost children to miscarriage, neonatal death or stillbirth. And this started here in Leeds, the city where I was brought up, but not born in. I'm a Lancashire lass at heart, an Accrington Stanley lass actually. And now, since the pandemic, we branched out into offering counselling, coaching, trauma healing programs, bereavement support groups, as well as child loss support groups and rainbow mama groups as well, for women who are pregnant again who've lost before in a previous pregnancy. We also have services for our men as well as our women. And the thing that sets us separate is that we're a diverse team of different backgrounds, psychotherapists, counsellors, psychologists, male and female, different religions, different cultural backgrounds, and different languages, which I felt was needed for our communities. And we're a nationwide service, so we operated all throughout pandemic on a virtual platform as well as telephone. And throughout that process, the one thing that stuck out the most was how people came forward, not knowing how to go back to functioning fully. How do you navigate through a worldwide pandemic, not being able to see your family, being isolated, cut off, and grieving multiple layers, very complex grieving process. It's very hard to even go through one loss, let alone multiple losses, because you were stripped of your freedom. We are still stripped of our freedom to some extent. Our lovely hostess, you don't feel you can do what you need to do without these little rituals anymore, and many people still feel that. You know, people who already suffered before from OCD and other illnesses actually felt they were more hyper. They were more heightened in their symptoms, which made it impossible for them to function fully, which isolated them further within themselves, even being isolated in their homes. So how did we turn it around? We turn it around by reaching out in all aspects, giving a broader way of communicating with our neighbours, our friends, our families, so we all adapted like we do. Survival instinct kicks in, doesn't it? So we went onto the social platforms. I think my mum has never used WhatsApp and virtual video as much as she did in the pandemic. She now knows how to use a phone, which she's had over a decade, by the way, but she never used it before. It was always like, I don't know how to darn thing, come to my house like you should do and come and touch me, hug me properly. You know, I had within my own family, some family members who refused to come past the gate at the driveway. I was isolating with my mother, and I was fortunate enough to be living next door, so I was there with my kids and my mum and my dad. But some of my siblings still chose to come in, and they refused to be isolated from their parents. They felt an obligation. In some cultures, it's a massive, barrier to their beliefs to be isolated from their parents, especially if their parents are alone. It's their obligation, a duty to care for them. And then when somebody died, it was an obligation to visit, to bury the dead, to give them their rights. That was really vitally important, and that was taken away. So in that grief moment, there is all the cycles of grieving, as you will have heard these steps, you know, anger, bargaining, depression, all of that going on. But acceptance was there for some, but not for everybody. And I just wanted to turn it on its head and understand that, along amongst many of you, myself, I have lost colleagues, I have lost family, throughout all of this process of the pandemic. And the anticipatory grief that we are all in, and we're still in, by the way. Every one of us, on a global level, has been grieving, and still is. And how do we fight that? We fight that by taking one step at a time, by reaching out and smiling to the person next to us, and asking that vital question, would you like a hug? Like we did this morning. Would you like a hug? Are you shaking hands? Would you like anything? Would you like some company to go for your walk? Would you like a help with your shopping? Or to do a bit of gardening with your neighbours? It's about being kind to each other. It's about reaching out and connecting. I think more people connected in our communities over the pandemic than they ever have in many, many years. I think a lot of people came out to understand that, how much it mattered when you did go out to the park and you passed somebody instead of just scuffling along. You actually looked up and made eye contact and said, good afternoon, good morning. And that mattered, that connection, that human connection. And that's what it comes down to. What makes grieving easier, what turns it around from being sad to good grief, is actually having that compassion and having that kindness for each other and having that patience with each other. I know I probably have finished a lot earlier than I should have. But I would like to open up and offer out to everybody else as well on your thoughts on what I've shared today. If anybody's got any comments to come back, that would be really good, because I do like to keep my talks interactive, if that's okay with you, Gloria. Anybody would like to ask anything or say anything?
Yeah, just that part of my experience of lockdown was really, really positive, because I got to spend a lot more time with my daughter and hear what was going on for her at school and be more part of it, and I really appreciated that, and the nicer, just the drop in pollution. I just wanted to bring that in, that part of the experience was very positive for me, as well as the challenges that came with it.
Of course, definitely, it has to be said, and I'll just repeat what you said on the mic, that definitely there are some positives out of the pandemic, which meant spending more time with our family. The hustle bustle of life completely slowed down. People were able to spend more time with the family they had nearby. And obviously the pollution as well, how the world stood still and came to a quiet, to help it heal a little. And that is a part of it. That is about the part of being patient and about being kind to ourselves and to others around us. And I think that was much needed, definitely, and it still is happening in some places. Over to yourself, the gentleman in the back.
Good way to start. I had a 24-weeker. I had a baby born, over 24 weeks, 1 pound, 3 ounces. I think the grief of that is to a point that I haven't seen her. She just turned 18 this year. I haven't seen her for about, I don't even remember now. She died just maybe 16 years ago. And it was a tale of two cities, in the sense that I was going through my training and I had decided my career in my life, and we separated. And to this day, I've been battling to say, go to Karachi, or how I communicate with her, how I overcome that grief. I just don't know comment as to how, to this day, it feels raw, 23rd of July, every day.
And that, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for trusting this space. And that again just shows how that love and formed in a space, no matter how big or small, and you felt that. Grief, especially that kind of grief that you were talking about in losing a loved one, losing connection, will always feel raw. It's not something that goes away. If I had a flipboard here, I'd like to draw on there and say when somebody leaves or you lose somebody, especially to death or to out of your life, any connection that you lose, it's like a big hole in your heart. It feels like almost like it's overwhelmed and the whole heart becomes black. And you think you're never going to get out of that black hole. But actually, eventually with time, you grow around that emptiness. Your life becomes bigger, the circles become bigger, but the actual hole doesn't shrink, it stays the same. But your life grows around it. And that, in a way, can be quite encouraging and comforting to a lot of people, especially if you've lost somebody to death, because they're with you all the time. I am the mother of 11 children. I've lost 9. I have buried children. That is the birth of Hope Bereavement Support. That is how I founded it. That is how I stand here as a CEO today. And I have my own private practice. I went back to become a counsellor. I'm a psychotherapist. I supervise other counsellors. I have a team of over 45 people nationwide. I have 2 businesses. I was a businesswoman before I fell into therapy, but I was always an activist in my community. I've always worked with other organisations and volunteered because I wanted a better home for not just myself, but for my family of humanity, for my other people around me. That mattered a lot to me always in my heart. And that I never gave up on that. And I never did till today. So for my response to yourself would be, the grief that you have, it's about looking at yourself in the mirror and actually accepting it and saying, okay, I see you, I hear you, and I feel you. And it's about looking at yourself and saying that. The grief is part of you. Accepting that, and then using it to empower you to move forward in whatever step feels natural and best for you. Inshallah.